The corridors of St. Augustine High were always noisy between classes, a steady hum of chatter and footsteps. But when the final bell rang, silence swallowed the building. For most students, that silence meant freedom. For me, it meant something else entirely. My name is Adil, and I was 17 the year it all began. On the surface, I was like everyone else, uniform pressed, books stacked, eyes fixed on university applications. But beneath it, I carried a secret that no one could see. My attraction to men was something I had never dared to voice aloud. In our town, those confessions had consequences, and I wasn't brave enough to test them. The only person who ever stirred that hidden part of me was Mr. Cameron, my English teacher. He was not only admired for his crisp way of speaking and immaculate handwriting, but also respected by staff and students alike. Married, in his mid-30s, with a reputation for being both firm and approachable, he was the kind of man everyone trusted. Yet when he looked at me across the classroom, I sometimes felt the weight of that gaze pressed too long, too steady, as if it carried unspoken thoughts. It started innocently enough. I had been struggling with essay writing, fumbling through grammar that seemed to come easily to others. After returning yet another paper marked in red, Mr. Cameron paused at my desk and said quietly, "Stay back after class tomorrow. We'll work on this together." The request lodged in my chest like a secret note. My friends laughed about cricket matches and weekend plans, but all I could think about was being alone with him. The next day, as students rushed out, I stayed behind, clutching my notebook. The room shifted once the last footsteps faded. Without the chatter and shuffling, the space felt different, more intimate, charged with a quiet that made me hyper-aware of every sound. The ceiling fan hummed softly, chalk dust lingered in the air, and the faint evening light cast long shadows across the desks. Mr. Cameron sat on the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He scanned my essay again before looking up. "You have good ideas, Adil," he said, voice calm but firm. "You just don't trust yourself enough to put them clearly. Writing isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest." His words struck deeper than he probably intended. Honesty was something I avoided. I lived in careful half-truths, smiling at jokes I didn't find funny, pretending to admire girls I felt nothing for, crafting a version of myself that seemed safe. And here he was, unknowingly urging me towards something I was terrified of. We went over my sentences line by line. His hand would hover near mine as he guided me through revisions, his fingertips sometimes brushing the edge of my notebook. Each small contact sent a current through me, though I kept my eyes down, afraid of what might show in them. At one point, he leaned closer to circle a phrase in my notebook. The faint scent of his cologne reached me, woody, steady, undeniably masculine. I struggled to focus on the paper as my heart pounded. "Better," he murmured, underlining a revised sentence. His voice had softened, carrying an intimacy that felt different from the authority he usually commanded in class. I nodded quickly, not trusting my own words. The minutes stretched, every exchange layered with something unspoken. It wasn't just grammar lessons anymore. It was a dance of proximity, of breaths and silences. I knew it was dangerous to even imagine what I was feeling, yet I couldn't stop. As the sky outside darkened, he finally closed my notebook and handed it back. "You've done well today," he said, his eyes lingering on mine longer than they should have. For a moment, the air between us seemed to narrow, as though the walls had closed in to hold a secret neither of us dared to name. I gathered my things, my fingers trembling slightly, when his voice called out again, gentle, almost hesitant. "Adil," he said, his tone dropping lower. I turned, notebook clutched against my chest. He smiled faintly, though there was a weight behind it. "Come again tomorrow. We'll keep working." And just like that, the line between teacher and student blurred a little more. As I stepped into the empty corridor, my pulse still racing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just about essays anymore. It was about us, whatever us meant. And though I didn't yet understand where it would lead, I knew I would return. The following days unfolded with a rhythm I both anticipated and feared. Each time Mr. Cameron asked me to stay after class, the request seemed casual enough for anyone else, But to me, it was a summons to a hidden world. A world where the air between us felt too heavy with meaning, where silence carried more weight than spoken words. The classroom became our sanctuary. Once the last student slipped out, the energy of the room transformed. The noise of the day fell away, replaced by the low hum of the ceiling fan and the faint squeak of chalk when he wrote examples on the board for my benefit alone. It was here, in this suspended quiet, that lines began to blur. At first, it was purely academic. He would lean over my desk, his hand resting on the back of my chair as he explained a point, his voice calm and deliberate. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, his guidance shifted. When my sentences improved, he no longer limited his praise to words. His hand would linger on my shoulder, warm and grounding, before retreating as if he had caught himself. "Adil," he said one afternoon, his tone quieter than usual, "you have a sharp mind. You just need someone to believe in it." The words reached deeper than he knew. No one had ever spoken to me with such conviction, as though my worth was unquestionable. I found myself craving those moments, staying late not just to learn but to feel seen. And then came the first true crossing of boundaries. We were seated side by side, reviewing a passage from my essay. I stumbled over an explanation, frustrated at myself. Without hesitation, he placed his hand over mine, steadying me. "Don't overthink," he said, his eyes locking with mine. The contact was brief, but in that instant, the room seemed to collapse into a single point of focus, his hand, his voice, his presence. I should have pulled back. I should have ignored the rush of warmth that flooded me. But instead, I held still, letting the moment linger longer than necessary. When he finally withdrew, neither of us acknowledged what had just passed. Yet something irreversible had shifted. After that, the meetings carried an unspoken charge. We both played roles, he the responsible teacher, I the attentive student, but underneath we skirted around a current neither of us wanted to name. Our conversations strayed from grammar into pieces of our lives. He told me about his love for poetry, how it reminded him of the passions people rarely admitted. His voice softened when he spoke of loneliness, a word that hung between us like a fragile confession. He never mentioned his wife directly, though I knew she existed. Instead, he alluded to responsibilities and expectations, phrases that carried the weight of a marriage, but none of its intimacy. The more he revealed, the more dangerous it became. I found myself watching the clock during the day, waiting for the final bell, my heart quickening with the knowledge of what awaited me. My friends teased me for staying late so often, but I brushed them off with excuses about struggling with essays. The lies tasted bitter, yet I told them willingly. One evening, as I packed my books, he stopped me with a hand lightly touching my arm. The gesture was subtle, but the look in his eyes was not. It was raw, conflicted, and undeniably vulnerable. "Adil," he began, his voice unsteady, "you know this isn't ordinary." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "I know," I whispered. He hesitated, as though fighting an internal battle, then released my arm and stepped back. The distance between us returned, but the silence throbbed with everything left unsaid. From that night on, secrecy became part of our bond. Every glance in the hallway, every brush of proximity during class, was charged with hidden meaning. No one else noticed, but to me, the world had tilted. And then, one late afternoon, the danger became real. We were bent over my essay, his hand guiding mine across the page, when the door rattled suddenly. Someone outside tested the handle. Both of us froze, breath caught in our throats, hearts pounding. After a long pause, the sound faded, and whoever it was walked away. We didn't speak for several moments, the silence louder than any noise. When our eyes met, fear and exhilaration mixed in equal measure. For the first time, I realized that what we were building wasn't just fragile, it was perilous. And yet, instead of pulling away, I knew I was already too far gone to turn back. The rattling of the door never truly left me. Even as days passed, its echo remained lodged in my chest like a warning bell. reminding me that secrecy could shatter at any moment. Mr. Cameron's demeanor shifted after that evening. He still asked me to stay behind, still guided me through essays and listened to my halting attempts at honesty, but there was a new distance in him, a caution that hadn't existed before. For me, the pull only deepened. The thrill of being chosen, of having his undivided attention, made me restless outside those classroom walls. I began to measure my days by the hours until we would meet again. But in the quiet moments, doubt seeped in. I thought of his wife, a woman I had glimpsed once at a school function, her smile easy, her hand resting on his arm as if she belonged there. The image stung. One evening, as we lingered after finishing an essay, I found the courage to ask, "Do you ever feel guilty?" The question startled him. His pen stilled on the page, and his shoulders stiffened before he answered. "Every day," he said softly, not looking at me. "But sometimes life gives you something unexpected, something you can't ignore, no matter how wrong it feels." His honesty pierced me. It was the closest he had ever come to admitting that what we shared existed outside grammar lessons and late afternoons. Yet it also underscored the truth I had been avoiding. I was part of his betrayal. Our encounters grew heavier with unspoken weight. We no longer needed words to fill the silence. Our eyes, our gestures, spoke enough. But with that intensity came fragility. Each brush of his hand across mine felt like both a promise and a goodbye. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. The corridors were unusually empty, the air outside thick, with the smell of rain. We sat across from one another, my notebook forgotten between us. He seemed distracted, his gaze drifting to the window where raindrops streaked the glass. "Adil," he began, his voice low, "we can't keep doing this." My chest tightened. "Why not?" The question came out more desperate than I intended. He sighed, rubbing his temples as though the words themselves pained him. "Because it's not fair. Not to you, not to me, not to the life I already have. This," his hand gestured between us, "was never supposed to happen." Anger flared inside me, sharp and sudden. "So, what was I to you then? Just a distraction?" His eyes snapped to mine, filled with a sorrow that almost undid me. "No, you are more than that. But wanting something doesn't make it right." The silence that followed was unbearable. I wanted to shout, to beg, to hold on to the fragile world we had built in stolen moments. Instead, I sat frozen, feeling both seen and abandoned in the same breath. When I finally stood to leave, my legs felt unsteady. He didn't stop me, didn't reach for me the way I hoped he might. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it sounded final, like the sealing of a chapter. In the weeks that followed, our connection dissolved into routine. He returned to being just Mr. Cameron, the teacher whose comments were confined to the margins of my essays, his eyes carefully neutral whenever they met mine. I forced myself to mirror his restraint, though each glance left me aching. And yet, something within me had changed irrevocably. The secrecy, the intensity, the heartbreak. It had revealed a truth I could no longer deny. For the first time, I understood the shape of my desire, the cost of my silence, and the danger of love bound in betrayal. Years later, I can still picture that classroom. The chalk dust floating in the dim light, the quiet hum of the fan, the desk where my hand trembled under his. Those afternoons remain etched in me, not as fantasies, but as a reminder of how desire can both ignite and wound. What began with essays ended with a lesson neither of us could teach aloud. That forbidden love leaves no clean lines, only shadows that linger long after the classroom empties. Time has a way of softening memories, but not erasing them. Years after I left St. Augustine High, the image of Mr. Cameron still lingered in fragments, his voice correcting my sentences, the way his eyes lingered too long, the silence of an empty classroom thick with unspoken truths. Those fragments lived in me like pressed flowers in a book, fragile, faded, yet impossible to throw away. University brought distance and with it, perspective. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke openly about identity, who didn't flinch at the word gay. Their ease contrasted sharply with my own hesitation. I often wondered if my secrecy had been born entirely from fear of society, or if part of it had been shaped by that first entanglement, secretive, hidden, forbidden. One evening, during my final year, I stumbled across a familiar face at a bookstore cafe. Mr. Cameron. He looked older, though not unkindly so. His hair carried streaks of gray, his shoulders seemed heavier, but his smile, soft, hesitant, was unmistakable. For a moment, I was 17 again, clutching a notebook while my pulse thundered in my ears. "A deal," he said quietly, almost as if testing whether he was allowed to use my name. We sat across from each other, coffee cooling between us. Conversation began with the safety of small talk, his work, my studies, but the undercurrent was undeniable. His eyes still carried that same weight, that same mixture of gentleness and regret. "Do you ever think about it?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't pretend not to understand. His gaze dropped to the table, and he exhaled slowly. "More often than I should." The admission both comforted and unsettled me. Part of me wanted him to say it had meant nothing, that I could fold the memory away as a youthful mistake. But hearing that he remembered too, that the shadows haunted him as they did me, tethered me to him all over again. He told me his marriage had grown distant. "We live like roommates," he said softly, his thumb tracing the rim of his cup. "Sometimes I wonder if what I gave up was worth it. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, sadness settled over me. Infidelity, I realized, leaves more than broken promises. It leaves pieces of people scattered, unable to fit neatly back into place." As the cafe emptied, our conversation grew heavier. He admitted he had wanted to protect me back then, even as he betrayed the vows of his own life. "You were too young," he whispered, his voice thick, "too unprepared for what it could mean." I wasn't the only one unprepared, I said quietly. Our eyes met, and for the briefest moment, the years between us seemed to collapse. But this time, I didn't reach for him. Neither of us did. The pull was still there, but so was the knowledge of what it had cost us. When we parted, his hand brushed mine in a gesture that was both farewell and acknowledgement. No promises, no confessions, just a quiet recognition of something that had shaped us both. Walking away, I realized that what had once been a story of secrecy and danger had become something else entirely, a reminder of how love and betrayal can coexist, how desire can open doors to self-discovery even when it ends in heartbreak. I carried that understanding with me, not as a wound, but as a scar, visible only when I looked closely, yet always there beneath the surface. The classroom was gone, the chalk dust long settled, but the lesson remained. Sometimes the loves we cannot keep are the ones that teach us who we truly are.